Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the mid lane tier list for patch 7.24. So this patch is going to be the one that will be out for around a month because they're not releasing another another big patch until around the start of January. So this list will be relevant for the next couple of weeks here. So it should give you a pretty good idea of what you should be looking to pick and ban and play for 7.24. So to start it off in the tier 1 here is going to be Corki. So the preseason has definitely benefited Corki a lot. The big change that kind of brought him back into the meta was the change to his base AD. They increased his base AD by quite a bit, and because of that, the synergy he's got with Sheen and Trinity Force just means that his Sheen procs are going to do a lot more damage once he does pick that item up. Fleet Footwork also got buffed in this patch, so because of that, it is the keystone that most people are running now on Corki, and it is the one that is performing the best. So because of those changes, it's another reason to why he got stronger in this patch. And then because in this current meta, games really don't last very long, it's great for champions like Corki because Corki comes online at one item. He's got the great one item power spike with the Trinity Force, so as long as you don't get completely destroyed in the first few levels and you can just farm up, get to your Trinity Force, then you're really going to have a great impact in the mid game. And you've also got your package as well, so if you can just get a nice package roam off in the early game, get one of your lanes snowballing, then you're gonna have great success with Corki in this current meta. So next up here is going to be Katarina, and Katarina is what I would call the best assassin right now for 7.24. I think that Katarina just outclasses a lot of the other assassins because her ability to snowball right now seems like it's a lot easier to do than the other assassins, and it feels like one kill on Katarina is going to be a lot more useful than one kill on someone like a Zed or a Talon. I just feel like your ability to take over a game with Katarina, if you just get a little bit of an advantage in the laning phase, is much greater than these other assassins. Some of the things that factor into her great snowball ability in the early game is the fact that, similar to Corki, she does have a great one item power spike with the Gunblade. You really come online with Katarina once you pick up that item, and it just allows her to take over a game. Electrocute and sudden impact are also insanely good on her, and then because magic resist is no longer in runes anymore, it means that Katarina and these AP type champions are going to be able to do quite a bit more damage in the early game, which does add to her ability to snowball. And then overall, Katarina's blind pick ability in this patch is really good. The only two champions that she's losing to right now are Kassadin and Jace, and I think that the fact that you can change up your build depending on the matchup makes her a great pick as well. You can even go for a Maw on this champion if you're up against a harder AP mid laner in the laning phase. For example, if you're playing against a Kassadin, you can go Maw, and no other AP mid laner can do that. Because Katarina does have the AD scaling in her kit, it does allow her to go for these like different builds, and it does allow her to succeed in a lot of different matchups. So Malzahar is going to be in the tier 1 for yet another patch, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about this pick. Right now, one thing to note on the champion though is that he's actually performing very well with the unsealed spellbook. I think the reason to why this is performing pretty good on him is because you can take the teleport and flash in the early game, and you can just run the teleport to get back to lane if you're getting poked out in a harder matchup, and it does allow Malzahar to very easily survive the laning phase. And then once it does reach the mid to late game, you can swap out that teleport for either Ghost or Exhaust depending on what your team comp needs, and it will allow him to be a lot more successful inside of mid to late game team fights. You're also going to have the reduced cooldown on your flash, so it does allow Malzahar to go for those flash ult plays a lot more often. So overall, Mouse is probably just your most consistent mid lane pick for this patch. You can play him into anything similar to Katarina right now. He's even strong if you do fall behind with him because of the amount of utility he provides in his kit with his silence and his ultimate. So if you are just looking for a safe mid lane pick in this patch, then I'd be playing Malzahar. So a champion moving up into the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Morgana. Morgana did receive some really good buffs at the start of the patch. They did get hotfixed, and even though they got hotfixed, I still think she's a really good pick here for 7.24. So they did change the way Morgana's passive works. It's no longer spell vamp. You're just going to heal for a flat amount of damage that you do, and it's for 20% of the damage that you deal, you're going to heal for. So I think that just allows Morgana to stay a lot more healthy during team fights. If you get a really good ultimate off during a team fight on multiple targets, then you are going to be healing for quite a bit. And they also did reduce the cooldown of Morgana's W. If you are going to be hitting that on multiple targets during a team fight, then you're going to have a pretty low cooldown on your W. Now, I think that in the current meta, Morgana is a pretty good pick in the mid lane. She can outshove and outroam a lot of other mid lane picks in the early game. So what you want to do on this champion is you basically just want to AFK shove the lane with your W and then look to go for roams either top lane or bot lane. And then because she does have the shove on a lot of champions in the early game, she's performing very well against champions that don't have the best shove or counter shove in the laning phase. So picks like Zed, Kassadin, Yasuo, Syndra, Akali, she is destroying in this patch. And the one that definitely stood out to me was the Kassadin pick. She is destroying Kassadin right now, and I think that's because she can just deny him a lot of CS in the early game, and she does have the ability to just very easily lock him down during team fights. Kassadin has to jump forward in order for him to get in and deal his damage, so it is pretty easy for you to line up that bind on Kassadin and just burst him down very quickly. And the final champion in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Xerath. So I think that Xerath right now is just a very strong mid lane pick. There's a lot of different reasons to why Xerath is super good for 7.24. One change that I feel like a lot of people didn't really notice or just didn't really take into consideration was the change to the towers in 7.23. I'll put it up on screen here, but basically the tower's health got increased by 300, but they now take a little bit more damage from minions. Now this is actually really good for these wave clear type mid lane champions like the Xerath or the Anivia or Vel'Koz. Any champions that have great wave clear are going to benefit from these changes, and it just allows for your tower to stay up for a lot longer. Because Xerath does have great wave clear, it's going to be a lot harder for the enemy team to actually take down that mid lane tower. And another reason to why I think Xerath is a little bit stronger than these other poke type mid lane picks, to why he's better than someone like a Ziggs or a Vel'Koz, is because he can very easily one-shot the back wave with one ability, whereas these other picks like the Ziggs and the Vel'Koz, they need at least 2 abilities to one-shot the back wave. So it just means that Xerath is going to be a much more reliable pick at wave clearing, and it just means that it's going to be a lot harder for the enemy team to actually end up cracking towers against this pick. And then one thing to note on the runes for Xerath, you should be changing it up depending on the matchup and depending on the enemy team. So take Comet in most situations. If you are up against another mid laner who does not have a gap closer, then I would be taking Comet. But if you are up against a mid laner who does have a gap closer, or if you're up against an enemy team that has a lot of mobility, then taking Aerie is going to be a lot more consistent in that situation. And then moving on to the tier 2 picks now, these are going to be the strong champions. They are definitely very strong for this patch right now, but they're just a little bit weaker than the tier 1 picks. So the picks I want to take a look at here are going to be these really good wave clear, longer range mid lane champions like the Ziggs, the Vel'Koz, the Lux, the Zillion, the Azir, and then even Anivia. I think these picks are great in the preseason because of that change to the tower in 7.23, and then also because of the changes to the runes as well as some of the items. Manaflow Band is great on a lot of these picks. Lux is one that's doing really well with Ultimate Hat and Transcendence. You get your ultimate down to around a 30-second cooldown in the mid to late game, and it just makes your ability to find picks and burst down those targets really easy to do, and you can do it very consistently. And then all of these champions right now are basically building Sork Brutes and Liandries as their core items. Some are going for Morellos, and then like a Nivea will obviously go for tier, but going for Sork Brutes and Liandries and having that for the mid game just means your damage output is going to be super high. Champions don't have a lot of magic resist anymore, so going for those magic pen items just means that if the enemy team does not have a lot of magic resist for the mid game, you're going to be pumping out a ton of damage during team fights. And then champions like Twisted Fate, Talia, Talon, and even Galio are really good right now if you know how to play them correctly. They have great roaming potential in their kits, and their ability to influence side lanes is great. And because we are more so in an early game focused meta, it means that these picks do have the potential to completely take over a game. And then for the tier 3 champions, these are going to be the average picks. I wouldn't really recommend playing these champions right now unless you do have a lot of games on them, or unless they are your best champions, because they're just pretty underwhelming compared to the tier 2 and definitely very underwhelming compared to the tier 1 picks. So overall, these picks are just very weak in the current meta. We're seeing a ton of hard engaged supports being played right now, like the Leona, the Braum, the Alistair, and because these champions are all shorter range mages besides the Yasuo, it means they do have to come pretty close up to deal their damage, and it just makes them super vulnerable against these hard engaged supports. They're also pretty weak against their counterpart mid lane champions right now, so they're pretty weak against these long range poke champions because they just can't really get in range to trade against them, and they just very easily get poked down in the mid to late game. And then against assassins, all of these picks here struggle pretty hard against assassins as well, and they are pretty common right now in this patch. So that is going to be all for this video. In my opinion right now, the mid lane is definitely pretty balanced and pretty strong. I think there's a lot of different picks that you can play right now, which was evident by how many champions I had in the tier 2. Obviously, the tier 1 picks are definitely a cut above right now, most of the other champions, but I think that you can really play a lot of picks in this meta and have some really good success in 7.24. So if you guys did enjoy this video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.